Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? All right, here we go. Fade to Black. Kicking off another week. It is Monday, June 24th, 2024. I hope that everybody had a great, safe, fun, and amazing weekend. I did. I posted a lot of pictures. I had a lot of action going on around here in my world. So, that being said, we've got an amazing week coming up on Fade to Black. That is because tonight, kicking off the week, Russell Targ is with us. That's right. It is, I just call the show remote viewing, just to make sure that we could do whatever we needed to do tonight. Russell Targ is here. Tomorrow night, Michael Orrell is with us. He took a set of photographs back in the early 90s, and that caused quite a sensation. And he has gone on his road of research and connecting those images to ancient artifacts and sites around the world. We'll be talking about all of that tomorrow night with Michael. Wednesday, the one and only Emily Harrison is here. That's right. It is an Akashic Records evening Wednesday night with Emily. Thursday night, director, TV host Ron James is with us, and he is breaking four new ET and UFO cases with us here on Thursday night. Now, before I bring Russell in, I just want to let everybody know, here we are in June, heading into July. I have got a full schedule rolling out in the second half of 2024. It starts with the 2024 Conscious Awards in Miami, Florida. ForbiddenKnowledge.com is the link. Head down there and get your tickets. That's August 3rd and 4th. All kinds of events going on all night long, ending with the awards ceremony on Sunday evening. Then right after that, in September, Contact at Sea. That cruise to Alaska, that is September 6th through the 13th. Again, the links for that are below. Then I'm heading to Egypt in October 3rd through the 14th. I'll be spending my birthday once again this year in Luxor. And I'm going to say that doesn't suck. And that is with Forbidden Knowledge. You can get on the waiting list for that. And then immediately after that, when I get back to the States, I turn around and head south to South America for Peru and Bolivia with Brian Forrester. Again, that tour is sold out, but you can get on the waiting list because somebody may cancel. You never know what those issues are. All right. Let's get this week started. Tonight, Russell Targ is with us. Now, we're going to be going deep. When I say that, it's Russell. We're going to go deep into the world of remote viewing. That's right. All of that groundbreaking work at the Stanford Research Institute. He led a top secret program that explored the potential of psychic abilities in intelligence gathering. That's right. And he wrote the book, Third Eye Spies. He's a physicist. He's an author. He's a pioneer in the development of laser and laser applications, was a co-founder of the previously secret Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 70s and 80s. And of course, that is called remote viewing. And after that, he got his viewing from the Masters and Space Company. He retired from Lockheed Martin Missiles and Space Company, which is right down the street from my house, by the way. That is always interesting to me. And there he was a senior staff scientist where he developed airborne laser systems for the detection of wind shear. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black the one and only, and our good friend, Russell Targ. Russell, my man.
Very happy to be with you. I'm glad that all is well in your studio.
It's all good. Russell, here's the thing. In this world that you and I exist in, stuff just goes wrong. It's just the way that it is, right? And you can't freak out anymore. I don't. There's always issues, and that's okay. I'm sure you've had your share of them over the years. I wanted to start off with this though, okay? And I really thought about this. What would be the one question I could start this conversation off with that you have never been asked? And I got it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Who is taller, you or Jacques Vallée?
I think we're about the same height right now. I would say that we're about the same height. I used to be 6'5". I'm now about 6'4", and I believe that his good French posture, which I don't have. My vision is very poor, so I spent a lifetime bending over books trying to read. But Jacques and I are about the same size.
Okay. Second question you've never been asked. Who's a better power forward at basketball? You or the French guy?
I think the French guy, without a doubt.
Is that right? Okay. I was looking at Jacques and I a few years ago.
Probably beat him at ping pong.
That's good to know. Jacques and I were hanging out a couple of years ago, and he showed me some pictures of the two of you back in the day. And you guys were young. You could tell that the lights were on upstairs, if you know what I mean. And you guys were the whole group right on the cutting edge of knowledge. Did you understand back then the groundbreaking stuff and its implications for the future? Did you understand that?
Well, I understood that the remote viewing work was going into modern physics where it had never been before. That we knew that a person sitting quietly in my office could quiet his mind and describe what was going on in the distance, in the far distance, or in the future. And since I left SRI about 50 years ago, I've been traveling all over the world teaching people how to do remote viewing. And I managed to demonstrate for myself that what I said was true, that almost anybody can learn remote viewing. Some people are better than others, but it's a natural ability. It's not weird. It's not limited to some freaks. But remote viewing is available to anyone who will quiet his mind and sit down and ask me to help them.
Now, I'm going to go back to Jacques Vallée for a second, if I may. This conversation is between you and I and friends, but I've got to go back to Jacques. All right? He said something to me, and I want you to be completely honest. He looked at me right in my eyes, Russell, and he goes, I got pretty good at remote viewing. Did he really, or is he pulling my chain?
Oh, no, he was early on with us. In the very beginning, he was doing remote viewing of materials of various kinds of. People would bring us in materials and want to know, can you use psychic ability to determine what these are? And Jacques was pretty good at that. Jacques is my lodestone for believing what's true in UFOs also.
Oh, no doubt.
I'm prepared to believe what he tells me. As a physicist, I generally want to see the data in my hand, but in Jacques' case, I'll make an exception.
Yeah.
I consider him utterly trustworthy.
Yeah. No, some of the, it's the whole group. Okay. It's not just you and Jacques, but it's the whole group. But sitting with Jacques, and it's the same thing with you, Russell, where you guys are sitting on a lot of research and a lot of knowledge. and you've probably forgotten more than you remember. And if that is the case, I want to know what you know. And I want to know what Jacques knows. There's stuff that's deep in there. And when he says something, or when you say something, I need to pay attention, and so does everybody else. And I mean that as a compliment. How did it start with you, with the remote viewing side of it? Was it experimentation into ESP or?
As a child, I was doing magic on the stage, fake magic. I'd be on the stage doing tricks, fooling people. And occasionally I would be halfway through a trick and realized that I was in touch with somebody who was asking me a question, because people handed me slips of paper. This is for something called billet reading. You give me a piece. It's too long to do it. You put a piece of paper in a jar, and I'll pull out one and hold it to my head. Of course, I've already read it, but you don't know that. And then I will use that information to try and answer your mystery question. And in doing that, I'm in sort of a altered state of consciousness. Once somebody said I'm standing with my eyes shut in the light, he's in an altered state. And I would occasionally get pictures of people's house or their situation, so I could supplement my crummy magic trick with some genuine ESP that would come my way. So by the time I graduated from high school, I said goodbye to stage magic and got interested in psychic research. Because I was also a very good card player. I was able to supplement I was a competitive bridge player, and I always knew which way to play the cards because I had an intuition of what was going to work. So I was
cheating. You were cheating. That's
right.
Cheating. That's cheating. You were cheating.
When you close your eyes and say, which way should I play the cards?
Oh, man.
More than once I've had a tournament director called over and ask my partner, do you guys have some secret convention that you use to communicate? And my very brilliant partner became chairman of the physics department at Columbia. He said, I never know what that guy's going to do. He just does his own thing, and I try and figure it out just the way everybody else does.
Yeah. Wait, hey, if you don't get caught, it's not cheating. That's fine. That's fine. But let's stay right there for a second, because in a weird way, I would call that precog, right? If you think about it.
I think precognition is much more available than people really understand now. Last year was a good year for precognition. One of my friends got a Nobel Prize along with two other physicists for showing that particles that are born together remain connected to each other. It's called entanglement. So the particles move across the universe, and you grab one, and the other one is aware that his partner has been grabbed. This is what Einstein called spooky connection at a distance in 1934. I remember that because of the year I was born. But Einstein said, I can't believe quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics predicts that particles coming from the same reaction can travel far away as they'll still be connected. And
yeah, no matter what is in between.
That's
right?
Yeah, that's called entanglement. And entanglement is now kosher in modern physics. And
you know what's interesting? Okay, so let's stay right here for a second. Here's what is interesting. Can you react to a precog and change the future? Right? And so before you answer that, if you and I travel to the future and experience that, and then come back and you precog something or whatever, you see, and then we change something, and we go back to the future, what are we going to see?
Well, that has too many parts to it. The answer to your initial question is yes. If you have a precognitive dream of, say, the wheels come off your motorcycle,
Right.
and you're going to crash, and you get up in the morning, you can remember that you had this frightening dream, and you can then go take a look at your motorcycle and notice that the nuts have come loose, and make use of the precognition to avoid the accident. So in this case, you had a precognition of a likely future, but you used the precognition to change the future.
Okay, so you're right. There was too many moving parts. So let's go to the second version of the question. You and I, we travel to the future, right? We jump on a spaceship, we take off, speed of light, we come back. We're 100 years in the future and whatever. But we know things. And then they tell us we can now go back in time. They figured out time travel. So we come back to 2024. And I go, Russell, that thing, can we change that? If it's already happened in the future, can we change it in the past?
You can affect the past, but you can't change the past. That is, if something has already happened in this lifetime, you can't go to next lifetime and make what has already happened to have not happened. So we successfully use precognition to forecast the silver futures.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. We're forecasting the silver commodity futures. And we did that with straight up remote viewing. You had to describe what object I would show you the next week. And the object you got to see was determined by whether silver went up a little, up a lot, down a little, or down a lot. Because even a psychic can't read the big board in the commodity exchange, but he can describe accurately what I'm going to put in his hand. So I gave him a task that he could do. He would then describe something. For example, he might say, I see something round and floppy and it's got an odd smell. Let me draw that. And he would draw that. And I would say, that sounds terrific. We're sitting at my coffee table on Monday. I'll see you Friday, and I will put something in your hand, and I hope it's what you described. I would then call the broker and say, what are your objects? What are your 4 objects? And he might say, I got a flower pot, a flashlight, a checkerboard, and my leftover pancake from breakfast. I say, I think we got a winner. God really described your leftover pancake. What does that pertain to? So the leftover pancake means that silver is going down a lot. So based on the fact that the viewer saw the leftover pancake, we would sell $35,000 worth of silver into a rising market. And of the 9 trials we did, that was the biggest success we had, because it was a bet against the market, and we were correct. That really happened. We did that 9 times, and we were correct 9 times in a row, and we're on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Now, does that mean, and I'm not being cavalier, sir, but does that mean we are in a determined world?
It means you have less free will than you think you have.
Right.
It's not determined, obviously, but you can give it more or less leeway depending on how you live your life.
Right. It's determined-ish.
That's right.
Yeah.
For example, I'm very interested in this entanglement business because I often have very clear dreams, which I identify as precognitive and then tell my wife about them. and then we will go and see if they pertain to what's on my computer screen, or in my email. And very often I will have a quite accurate dream about something's improbable thing that's going to show up on my screen. For example, I'll give you one example. I know telling your dream is like trying to interest somebody in your last night's acid trip.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it actually contains data.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a dream about electric trains running around the ceiling in my living room, the wainscoting in my living room. Those wonderful square-backed German electric trains were running around my living room. And I recognized the precognitive dream because my children have been gone for 50 years. I never had trains in this house. I am a connoisseur of electric trains, so it's an interest of mine. So I told her that this was such a unusual thing for me. I've never in my life dreamt about electric trains. So we went to my computer where I'm sitting now and let her punch the button to bring up my homepage, which turned out to be, which is always the New York Times. And on the front page of the New York Times, they had a whole picture story of the rebuilding of the elevated trains in Chicago, going around the downtown part of Chicago known as the Loop. It happens to be right above my father's old bookstore. So it's an area of Chicago I know very well. And these elevated trains are nice square-back trains with lights on the inside. So my dream was really indisputably caused by my experience 2 hours later of seeing the elevated trains in a big screen right in front of me. So I would say that my experience with the elevated trains at 10 o'clock was the cause of my dream at 6 o'clock. That is, the future caused the past.
Yeah, wow.
So in answer to your question, the future events can definitely cause something at an earlier time, but you can't change it.
Is it okay? I want to go backwards, and we're going to do that in a second. But right now, let's stay where we are. In a fundamental way, is remote viewing caused by entanglement? And I know it's a broad question. It's a broad question.
I understand the question. I've been thinking about that lately because my data are these very sharp dreams, and the game I don't write down my dreams, unfortunately, but the way I get credit in the big book is that if I really like a dream and it's not a wish fulfillment dream or an anxiety dream, then I will tell my wife about it, and then it occurs. So I got a perfect score of this year. The idea is that if you have a dream and you don't tell somebody about it and then it occurs, you don't get credit for it.
No.
So I'm willing to bet my credibility with my wife, Patricia, that the only dreams I'll tell her are ones that are going to come true.
Yeah. See, that is something that is tough. You go and you witness or you experience something and you're by yourself. Well, keep it to yourself because it's just a story. That's all it is.
Nobody will believe you.
It's just a story. It's just a story. So that's it. The fish was this big. Who was with you? Nobody. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So I can always, telling one of these stories, I can always produce my very trustworthy wife who will testify that I really brought her to the computer, hit the key, and there it was.
So so now let's go backwards and we're going to come back to entanglement.
Now you asked a good question, which I didn't have time to answer. You wanted to know, could precognition explain some parts of remote viewing? You asked me all remote viewing. Yeah, right. Precognition does not explain all remote viewing, and I'll tell you why. Because some of the time we get I may not have said what I wanted. Precognition does not explain all remote viewing because there are cases with our great psychic Pat Price where I was given a slip of paper with coordinates of something in the world. And I would then go take him to our little screened room, like a screen-covered phone booth, and say, here are the coordinates. I don't know what they pertain to. What do you see, Pat? Close your eyes and tell me what you see. And he would say, well, I'm lying on top of a building in the sun. The sun feels good. And there's a giant gantry crane, and I happen to know what that was. It's an 8-wheel crane with wheels on either side of the tracks, which is what he explained. And this crane is rolling back and forth over my body. I say, well, that's a very sharp description. Can you draw that? And he drew a gantry crane, which you probably is on the wall behind me, but you can't see it. So we brought that down to the CIA guys who are waiting for us and say, this is what Pat drew. And they rolled out a big scroll showing the plan of a Soviet weapons. See, this was top secret materials. I still stutter. It's declassified now. But unlike Mr. Trump, I can't tell you quickly classified material without even thinking about it, because in the real world, if you have top secret material in your possession, you treat it as though it's red hot, because if that gets to the wrong person, you go directly to jail. So anyway, Price described this 8-wheel gantry crane, and they rolled out the scroll, which had been taken by satellite photography from our super secret satellites. And he had drawn a almost photographically accurate picture of this 8-wheel gantry crane in a Soviet weapons factory in Siberia. So that was good for about 5 years furthering of our support from the CIA. It was a first-class miracle. And Pat got to see the picture. The next day, they said, well, that was so amazing, Pat. Could you tell us? We went back to headquarters, and people want to know, what are they doing in the building underneath that crane? And we went back into our little room, and he said, well, there are people in the basement in white coats. They're building a large steel sphere, 60-foot diameter steel sphere, and they're welding it together out of gores, like apple slices. They're welding these apple slices together. They're having a hard time because the material is so thick. But that's what they're doing, the 60-foot diameter sphere. So we went then back to the CIA, and they said, well, we don't, that's where the guys back at Fort Meade will be very happy to know about that. But I can't confirm that now because we don't know what was really there. And that's the way things stood for the next 2 years, and Pat Price died. So it turned out, published in Aviation Week 2 years after that event, that he had exactly described. And in my book, Third Eye Spies, I show pictures of the cranes and also of the spheres. But the point of the story is that Price never got feedback. Consequently, he did not precognitively get information. Words of one syllable, Price died before any living person knew about the spheres.
His death, and I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but it's part of the history of SDI and Stargate and the CIA, and you have the conspiracy side of it, and you have the people that will say that he was taken out. There are others that will say, no, that wasn't the case. Others will say that he talked too much. He was too much of a rock star and did this a little bit too much. And others will say that he knew too much. So what do you think is the real situation behind the death of Pat Price? The timing is certainly strange.
I can speak freely because I have no idea what happened to him. I can tell you the problem that he posed to them is that it was known in the CIA that Price was a high-level Scientologist, and he was revealing secret information. He would work day by day with our contract monitor, Ken Kress, the physicist, high-level CIA physicist, and Ken would interview Price with regard to what was going on in their secret world, and Price would be able to give them information that was correct. That's the good news. Bad news is he would also give the same information to his Scientology auditor. It's like his priest. It's that every few days the auditor would come by and Price would give confession or take confession. So he wasn't handing information off to the Russians. It was part of his, could say, religious practice that he and his person who was guiding him, anyway, Price showed him to be untrustworthy in a place where everything has to be secret. So it's as though you've got Superman working for you and you discover that Superman is a double agent.
Mm-hmm.
So the CIA was always nervous about Pat Price because they were aware that they couldn't hide anything from him. That every time Ken Kress would lay down a piece of paper on his desk, it would say top secret, top and bottom, and they were aware that Price sitting in his farmhouse could read that. And that used to really make them crazy because secrecy was the most important thing. So the CIA might have killed him because they couldn't stand a loose person who could destroy their secrecy. The Russians might have killed him because he was omniscient in the universe, and we were aware that they were able to read some of our secret material. So the Russians were aware that we looked into Semipalatinsk and saw the crane. So
Pat just couldn't.
Or he might have died from a heart attack because he was
right. It could have been natural. Could have been. Pat didn't seem to want to fly under the radar, did he?
No, he was not. His first thing that he did for us was a volunteer. Said, "I'm a retired police commissioner of City Burbank, and I've been using my ESP to catch criminals. Is there anything I can do for you?" And it just happened that we had just been given the coordinates of an American site of something or other. And Price described this as a military site, and he's going down inside, and he says it's called Sugar Grove, and there are projects underway, and he named the projects, which were like billiard, cue ball, 8-ball, 14-ball, rack up. And those were all the names of a top secret ongoing program at a NSA top secret facility. And in my film, Third Eye Spies, Kit Green looks with his true blue eyes right into the camera. And he said he named off all those top secret things one after the other. And these were top secret ongoing programs. And that's why the NSA got very angry, not with us, but with Kit Green, who is the one who gave us the coordinates.
Now, this is where let's go backwards.
So the answer to your question, not all remote viewing can be explained precognitively.
Right. How did you? Let's go back to 1970. How did you get involved in not only SDI, but how did you get on the radar so quickly? Was it something? I mean, how does that happen? Like Pat Price, you guys were already.
It happened magically. I was in 1970. You picked a good date. That was very well done, Jimmy. 1970. I had just built a very powerful laser, and you can probably see that over my head, depending on how you're. I'm standing in front of a big blue box, shining a light on a fire brick, and that's a 1,000-watt carbon dioxide laser, powerful enough to burn a hole right through a fire brick. And that was the most powerful laser in the world at that time. And I thought of a trick to, most lasers were much, much less powerful than this. And I thought of a trick to make, I didn't invent the laser, but I thought of a trick to make them much more powerful. But when I left graduate school at Columbia to work with Gordon Gould, who did invent the laser. So I was in on lasers in the very beginning. So in 1970, I was ready to cash in my laser chips. As I was aware early on that it's hard to make a living doing ESP research, because I knew a lot of ESP professors, psychologists, all of them very smart, and all of them were pretty poor. And I grew up in the Depression, and I was aware of being poor, and I didn't want to replicate that experience with my life. So I was not going to be a psychologist. But I thought that if I was successful as a physicist doing psychic stuff, I might be able to make some progress. So that's where I was in 1970. And it just happened that I was teaching at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, teaching remote viewing. And I ran into the owner of Esalen, Mike Murphy, whom I didn't know, very amiable Buddhist. And we got along, and I lectured on American and Soviet ESP research, and he thought that was interesting. And the next day, he called me at my home and said, "Russ, I'm really sick. I'm supposed to give a lecture at Grace Cathedral. And this is part of a chain of events that led to our doing ESP at Stanford." So Mike was sick of the dog. He couldn't give his lecture. Would I do that for him? And I, went to Grace Cathedral in San Francisco and gave Mike's lecture, which is, I was familiar with Soviet American research because I knew the women Ostrander and Schroeder who wrote the book, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. So I was extra informed about that. So I gave my lecture at Grace Cathedral for Mike. And the last guy who left the auditorium walked up to me and said, "That was a very interesting talk, Mr. Targ. My name is Art Reitz, and I'm the NASA director for new projects. I'm having a conference next week at St. Simon Islands. Could you come and give your physics talk on psychic research to a group of NASA scientists at St. Simon's Island and a conference on speculative technology?" And I said, yes, I can do that. So I got on the plane, went to this conference on a beautiful island, and I had built an ESP teaching machine, which is not as fancy as the one in my hand, but it basically has 4 colors, and you have to use your ESP to guess which color the machine is going to ring the bell. And if you're good at that, you'll ring the bell.
Okay, got it.
And my idea was that I wanted support from NASA, and I was telling Werner von Braun that I could teach astronauts to get in touch with their psychic ability to avoid crashes and near misses, such as they had with Apollo 13, which almost crashed due to a unobserved oxygen tank broken part. And he said, "I'm very familiar with that. Yeah, we would like to avoid that." And you may not know this, but I've been psychic all my life, said von Braun. So I'm outing a famous psychic who never got credit for being psychic. So he took me to the director of NASA, Jim Fletcher, and said, "Russell's built a lot of lasers for us, and he now wants to make use of his ESP teaching machine that offers feedback and reinforcement to help astronauts become psychically attuned to their spacecraft. And for reasons we don't really understand, that made perfect sense to Jim Fletcher. So it's like I was part of a story by Asimov where the semanticist says, that's true. Yes, nothing has to be true. It just has to sound true. So that day I sounded true. Von Braun liked my story. Jim Fletcher, head of NASA, liked my story. And Edgar Mitchell just came walking by and said, I'm working for SRI right now. Maybe he could do this work at SRI. So Edgar Mitchell from space took me and helped put off another laser guy to meet Charlie Anderson, the president of SRI. And within a week, we had a program, $80,000 from NASA. And to the rest of the ESP community, that seemed like magic. Because how did we convince them to do that? And the answer was, we had this concatenation of coincidental people all in a row who helped us do that.
Everybody bumped into each other at the same time, and that's not an accident. That's not an accident. That's not an accident. And I love how that happened. And here's another part to this. If Fletcher didn't think outside of the box, right?
If Fletcher didn't think outside the box, he would not have gotten to be the director of NASA.
That's true too.
And Von Braun always thought out of the box, which is how he became such a preeminent rocket designer.
Now, so you take these ideas. Now, back then, SRI, Jacques was already kind of there. He was, in the area, in the building, if you will. Putoff is now involved. And the group SRI at that time, now correct me if I'm wrong here, but SRI was also interested in making money, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It
Right.
was like a farmer's market. Anybody who had money and a good idea could do their project at SRI.
And they were creative thinkers, and they had the biggest of the biggest clients. And if you wanted to go, off the rails with an idea, SRI was the company, and they were going to find a way to monetize it for their clients. And that's not a crazy statement. That's actually a pretty good business model, isn't it?
That's right. And I'm also anomalously persuasive. If I think I have a good idea, I'm really very successful at convincing somebody else that the idea that I have is worth pursuing. Because I've gotten money from all sorts of people to do crazy things that have usually worked out very well. Because we were supported by NASA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Army. We had a whole Army program, which is a Stargate program, that we had a multitude of governmental people supporting our program, a couple of $1 million a year for 20 years. So that was tremendously high stakes ESP research surrounded by the rest of our ESP community who were living in poverty.
Right. My dad was a band leader of the Army band. Okay. And you know what he said to me once? Exactly what you just said. He goes, I could be a broke musician on the streets, or I can play in the Army band and get paid. Right? It's the same thing. It's just where you want to take your talents.
That's right. Well, I want to take my talents to someplace that would allow me to do my work and would pay me.
Right. Now, on the physics side of this, we talked about entanglement, but
basically I was willing to bet my career. See, I had a wife and a house and 3 kids, and I was making very good money as a senior laser scientist. And I
Right.
was willing to bet my career that I could get money to do ESP research and make the ESP work.
Now, is it a whole lot of stuff happening at the quantum level where, everything is very, very small, but if you get enough action going on down there, that's where it's not about, it's not a macro thing, is it? Right? It's got to be something where we almost can't measure or see it.
Well, these chains of coincidence were of interest to physicists and psychologists in the 19th and 20th century. The people were aware that there are more coincidences than there should be. So the study of anomalous coincidences was a thing that people would study that because they were aware that this is sort of free-ranging magic that was going on, and that is still not understood. People are aware that people are aware that that's going on, but they don't know why.
Well, that, like your psychic machine, right? You're affecting something at the quantum level, and it's a lot of something in this very small world to trigger
my gadget to make this work, to ring the bell, you don't have to affect the machine. You just have to look at it and said what color is going to come up and what's going to ring the bell.
Well, but my point being,
I don't believe that I'm affecting the machine. I have to intuit what I'm going to see in my face. I think it's precognition rather than affecting the machine.
Really? Okay, I kind of see it both ways. And if you are, okay, it's one thing to go into the office on the other side of the world in Russia and see papers on a desk or whatever, right? Which is some of the romantic side of remote viewing. But can you remote view Mars? Can you remote view Andromeda?
Well, Ingo Swann said he could remote view Mars, and I was with him when my NASA contract monitor, Art Reitz, who's my buddy, came by to visit, see how well we're doing teaching people to use the machine to develop their ESP. And we had data showing that people start out a chance and they get better. That is, we're offering feedback and reinforcement, which is the recipe for teaching. And we were showing that, yes, people can use this machine, and it's available from the Apple Store, the app you can buy, and people are buying it and are able to use it. But while he was in my office, while Art Reitz from NASA was in my office, Ingo was hanging around to find out what's the action, what's happening. And Art turned to Ingo and said, we're about to send Pioneer number 2 back to Jupiter next week. Can you look at Jupiter and tell us, are we going to find anything new that we don't know about? Can you look at Jupiter and tell me right now, are we going to find anything exciting or interesting that no one knows right now? And Ingo says, give me a pad of paper. And he put down a cigar and drew a picture of Jupiter with a large ring all the way around it. He said, there's this big ring, ice ring, all the way around Jupiter that no one's ever seen before. And Art said, aren't you thinking of Saturn? And Ingo, who does not suffer fools gladly, says, I've been looking at the universe my entire life. You have to believe that I know the difference between Jupiter and Saturn. And when you get to Jupiter, what I want you to do is send me back a picture. And in my new book, I show pictures that Ingo drew of the rings around Jupiter. And Jupiter is, of course, 400 million miles away. which is about 40 light minutes away. And it's becomes evident, especially to physicists, that he closed his eyes, looked up at the sky, and was able to describe something in real time that's 40 light minutes away, and it did not take him 2 minutes to describe it. So he could instantaneously tell us what was happening on Jupiter 400 million miles away. And that was a completely successful experiment.
Well, that was big news when that blew up.
Yes.
Right? Rings of Jupiter. That was huge. That was huge news.
Yes.
Again, I keep going back to the physics side of it. Ultimately, what do you think is enabling the brain to visualize something that is not in your location? Is that entanglement, or is there there's got to be a scientific explanation for it? Because
there's two categories of things that are going on. Let's go back to my dream experience, which is like forecasting the silver market. The silver market is very clean. Everybody understands that we're not cheating there. There's no way to fake an experiment with the silver market. The broker testifies on camera that we did indeed make $250,000 forecasting silver. And the way that was done is the psychic Keith Harari would sit in my dining room and describe what I was going to put in his hand the following week. And that's as a straight up precognition. Nobody knew the answer. There's no flaw on that experiment. Nobody could whisper him that it's going to be a flashlight and not a flower pot or a pancake. So there's a totally clean experiment, and the only way available to get that is precognition.
So the question is what is the causality?
Pat Price's description of the Russian tanks, the big spheres, and another one he did for the first experiment he ever did with us. I was sitting with Price while Hal Puthoff and Kit Green went to hide someplace in the Bay Area. And I told Pat, okay, Hal and Kit are out someplace. Can you describe where they are? And he said, I never did anything like that. I could find a crook going out with his car frightened in the area. And I said, well, let's pretend that's what's happening. Hal has his green Toyota. He's gone out into the city. Hal and Kit are in the front seat of the Toyota. Where do you see them going? He said, I could follow the car down Middlefield Road. They're turning into a park. It looks like a water purification plant. I see a square pool of water about 60 by 80 and a round pool of water about 100 feet. And the giant water tank on a tower behind it. So there's two things interesting about that. That is, the experiment would not. The question always is, well, what does an interviewer do? Why do you need an interviewer in remote viewing? I'm not psychic. I don't have a word to say. I just have to jolly him along and keep him on the track. So when he says I can't do it, it's impossible, I say, okay, close your eyes and follow the car, which I just made up. This is the very first remote viewing I ever did. And my job was to get this guy on the road, and he was able to describe what was there. And we got there, and there was no water tank. There was a swimming pool complex with a round pool, a rectangular pool, but there was nothing like a water tower. But we were happy. That is, for remote, this was our very first remote viewing with Pat Price. And we thought his description of this swimming pool complex as a water purification plant was okay, that we don't expect him to name it. 5 years later, Price was already dead, and everybody in Palo Alto got a bound book showing Palo Alto as it was 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, that park, Rinconada Park, used to be a water purification plant. And in the picture that I show in my book, Third Eye Spies, and what I'm looking at on my wall is a giant 75-foot water crane with a water tank on top. And it says this is the tallest thing in the city of Palo Alto at that time. So Pat Price not only did not get feedback from that experiment, because he died before anybody knew about it, but he was able to describe something that was no longer there, that had been there.
What do you think is more, I almost said the word credible. That's not the word I'm looking for. I'm not looking at this from the mind of a skeptic. I mean, for accurate results, I should say that. A blind, something that the target is sealed in an envelope, or like when, the head of NASA comes in and says, we're launching Pioneer 2 to Jupiter. What if Pioneer 2, he doesn't mention Jupiter, or he doesn't, you know what I mean? What is better? Something leading where you need to, feed something specific, or to keep it completely hidden and just say there's something here?
That is looking for a spacecraft going to Jupiter is a very high interest object.
Right.
We started out with Ingo Swann, the person who invented remote viewing and named it remote viewing. People were guessing cards in envelopes for 50 years before we came along.
Sure.
J.B. Ryan wanted to mathematize psychic abilities, and he had people guessing cards. And guessing cards is a very difficult task to do, because all the cards are. And the remote viewing is not a new idea. The first person to write about remote viewing was a guy on my wall, who's shining on the right side of the picture, Padmasambhava, wrote a book called Self-Liberation Through Seeing with Naked Awareness. And naked awareness was his term for ability to move through space and time. And his book, written 1,200 years ago, tells you that it's very hard to name things or identify them by their name, because that doesn't correspond to the way your visual sense operates. So you have to be willing to describe the things you're experiencing through the experience and not by naming them. And that was all known 1,200 years ago. And so Padmasambhava is a historical person who was a famous Buddhist teacher who was moved from India to Tibet to help quell internecine religious fighting that was going on in Tibet. The king of Tibet knew that this famous guru had all sorts of powers and brought Padmasambhava to Tibet, and he is responsible for what we know today as Tibetan Buddhism.
Let's take Russell, stay right there. Let's take our break. Our guest tonight, Russell Targ. We are talking about remote viewing. We're doing it all from the top to the bottom. This is Fade to Black. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Hi, this is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I want to invite you to come to Alaska with me on the Contact at Sea cruise. It is this September 6th through the 13th, 2024. We are on the largest ship in the Pacific Ocean. That's right, the Ovation of the Seas. It's an amazing cruise, and a ship this big is so much fun. We've got lots of activities and lots of great speakers. We are leaving from Seattle to Sitka, Alaska, Skagway, Juneau. We're going to end the cruise in Victoria, BC, and arrive in Seattle on September 13th. We've got a lot of amazing speakers, including we've got Seth Shostak, Scott Walter, Stephen Bassett, Daniel Sheehan, Daryl Sims, Mas Adi, Vivian Chavez, Grant Cameron, Geraldine Orozco, Misha Johnston, and Melanie Aguirre, and a whole lot more. All you have to do is go to divinetravels.com. You can also go to contactatsea.com. Both are going to take you to a full event schedule. You can check in, look at the boat, get things ready to go, and maybe get a cabin with a balcony. That's what I'm talking about. Come see the whales. Come check it all out. Let's go to Alaska this September 6th through the 13th, 2024 with me, Jimmy Church. Now, when you head to divinetravels.com or contactatsea.com and get signed up, you know what? Use my name, Jimmy Church. I'll see you there September 6th through the 13th, 2024. Let's go to Alaska. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Russell Targ is with us. We are talking about remote viewing. And so, Russell, for the audience, the expectation, I always get this in the chat when these kinds of conversations and guests are happening. They go, okay, can Russell remote view live on the air? So I'm going to ask you that. Can you switch it on? Can you turn it on and off? How easy?
That's really not my skill. My skill is to facilitate remote viewing in other people.
Okay.
And it's not a cop-out, it's the truth. And that's even more useful than my being psychic. Because when I ran the program at SRI for a decade, and people from the Army and other financial capabilities would come by, and they would want to see something psychic before they supported us. And the Undersecretary of the Army, Walter LaBerge, just comes to mind. He came into my office and said, we're thinking, I had wanted to set up a Army program so the Army wouldn't keep sending people to California to do jobs for them. I said, well, can't we train some Army people to do that themselves? So LaBerge came and said, yeah, we could do that. I'd like to see something psychic before we put money into this program. Can you get Ingo Swan to describe, show me something psychic? And I said, well, if Ingo describes something psychic, you'll decide it's a trick by the time he comes back and tells you where he's been hiding. But if I show you how to do it, then you'll have your own experience to deal with. And he said, well, I don't believe in that stuff. And I said, you don't have to believe anything. Remote viewing is not a religion. If you will just do what I ask you to do, all I want to do is tell me about the surprising images that show up in your awareness. And since only you know that, you can't do it wrong. So I just want Hal and your major have gone to hide somewhere, randomly chosen. I have no idea where they are. I want you to just close your eyes and tell me about the surprising image that shows up in your awareness.
Could I do that right now? Could I? Okay.
You're saying, could I lead you to do that?
Yeah. Grab an object. Don't show it to me. Put it in front of you. Let's see if we can do this. Okay. Now, I don't know what you have. Okay. So
this differs from what I would do with the undersecretary, because I had to do an experiment with him that was double blind. So
well, this is triple blind because you have no vision. I'm a doofus and I don't know what you have. So this is a triple blind.
It's a good experiment, but people will worry that I was whispering you the answer. But we can do this.
Yeah, let's try it. Okay,
I have a pretty unusual object.
Okay.
So you want to close your eyes.
Okay.
And you don't want to name this thing. Remote viewing is not about name, But tell me what you experience. What shows up in your experience? What's interesting about this object?
It's
I'm going to show to you in my hand on the screen. I can't hand it to you, unfortunately.
okay. Well, don't. My eyes are still closed, Russell. For some reason, I see something cylindrical. That's what I see. And
what happens if you hold that in your hand and turn it around?
okay, hold on.
What's the surprise you see? What's the surprise? What's the payoff of this thing? You hold it in your hand and you say, "Gee, that's a."
It feels okay. So this is what I'm getting. It's just going to be interesting. It feels aluminum, like it's metal, and it's like soft metal. I don't even know how to describe, but so I guess aluminum is what I'm thinking, and it feels long and round. Okay, I'm going to open up my eyes. Am I close?
Well, here's what you've got.
Whoa! Really? Wow! Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! That's a trip. That's a trip. I was having trouble with it, and with the feel. Whoa! Okay.
It's my trusty letter opener. You can't carry it on the street because it's too big.
Wow! That's pretty trippy. That's about as long as that's what I was seeing. Wow. If I would have stayed on that a little longer, Russell, I might have gotten a little bit closer.
I think you would have. You were on the way.
Yeah,
once you got this thing of being long and metal, and the handle is soft, that it is plastic.
Right.
The handle plastic, and the blade is sharp as can be. And that's my trusty letter opener.
Wow. Holy crap. Okay. My look, the hair on my arms is just standing straight up. I didn't expect that. I thought you were going to hold up a piece of paper.
That's about as difficult as remote viewing is. So I've been traveling all over the place doing workshops because it's fun to do because people get very excited. Because there's some people who will be knockouts and really tell you the whole story, where it came from, what it's made of. So it's really doing a workshop as remote viewing is a little adventure for everybody. So the end of my story is LeBerge described a circular building made of bricks with chairs all around it, and the random place they were sent to was a coffee house in the next town north, Menlo Park. At some, I can't even remember that, but the place I've never been, Allied Arts. It's an arts center and a coffee shop about 10 miles north of SRI. And he just drew the circular building in the front of that. And the payoff is that he was convinced that this can be taught even to a doofus like him who doesn't believe a thing. And we then started the program, which became Stargate. And Stargate was operational for more than a decade and had done hundreds of tasks for the CIA and DIA, finding submerged submarines, kidnapped officers. And that was the beginning. It took the Army off of our backs. So we didn't. That most of Hal and I are not operational kinds of guys. We're researchers. So we wanted to do research rather than finding kidnapped CIA people. The most famous thing we did for them, though, was finding a downed Russian bomber in Africa. In Africa, a Russian bomber had crashed or been abandoned. The pilot bailed out. We didn't know that at the time, but we knew that this Russian plane had been tracked by the CIA, and then it disappeared under the foliage. And we know that whole story because Jimmy Carter, in his last autobiography, has a chapter called Clairvoyance, where some psychics in California were able to find a Russian bomber buried in the jungle that we couldn't find even with our best cameras. And we located it, or Joe McMoneagle, the great psychic, located it next to a river. And when we sent in a helicopter, when the CIA sent in a helicopter to that spot, they sent a helicopter to the spot that Joe marked. And they landed their helicopter, they could see people pulling the airplane out of the creek, out of the river, right where he sent them. So that's the sort of thing that we did to support ourselves in the off periods.
You know what I always find interesting is that when a skeptic wants to step in, and pull in anybody like James Randi, right? I'll pull him out because he's so classic. But anybody like him, where they don't have answers, their answer is always just no. They don't back anything up, but also that their life is so narrow that they never want to drive off the street. They don't want to think about or speculate. They have blinders on. And that's what's very interesting to me. And the only progress, Russell, that we have made in any forms of science or technology is from somebody that was challenged and went against the grain. And that's the only way to move forward. Or we just stay stagnant in one spot forever. We should still be, swinging from trees. And we're not, because of those that think differently, right?
Yeah, I was once at a psychic party where a skeptic was there at the table with me. And he said, I know all you guys have done this thing, but I've never seen anything. I don't believe this stuff. And I said, will you believe it if you saw it? He said, of course I believe it if I saw it. I said, well, I knew that this was going to happen. So I have a very interesting object in my briefcase. And here's a pad of paper. I don't want you to tell me what it is. Just tell me about the surprising images that show up. And only you know that. So this is not a test. Just make a drawing of the surprising images that show up. And I can actually, I won't waste your time. I thought I could put my hands on exactly. Was a silver collapsible cup. And he just said, I see these three cups that fit together. And that's exact. And he drew it. And that was exactly what I had for him. So if you can get the guys to suspend his.
Hey, Russell, yeah. Stay with us. We're live on the air. Yeah,
no, I'm not far away.
Okay. What'd you grab? Oh, the cup. And he was able to draw that.
A very interested skeptic who I think is now deceased, but one of our favorite skeptics who was on a good day was a fair-minded man. And at that party, I was able to get him to suspend his disbelief for a microsecond to do something psychic. It can be done.
Right. And here's the crazy part. Russell, here's the crazy part. Physics, the hard sciences, and then you get into physics where physics is crazier and more woo than the wooest of the woo, right? Physics wants to convince us of entanglement, that a particle can affect another particle from the other side of the universe faster than the speed of light. That there are 11 dimensions. Let me finish. That the multiverse. Now physics is trying, especially astrophysics and theoretical physics, that the Big Bang never happened, that everything is infinite, and that the multiverse created other multiverses and created this one, and that time is now everything that we are woo about and enjoy. Physics is trying to convince us now that it is true based on algorithms, and you can't have it. Right. And you can't have it both ways, can you? Either you are woo or you are not. But don't tell me about parallel worlds and qubits and entanglement and the multiverse, right? and then say that a remote viewing is not possible. No, it's all the same thing.
That's right. Modern physics is still ahead of psychic abilities. That I was just picking up the sheet with the three Nobel Prize winners who described what Einstein described 90 years ago as interaction at a distance. He didn't want to call it goofy interaction at a distance. What is it? You probably even know that. Anyway, Einstein said there's interaction at a distance that was hard to believe. And now it occurs.
Yeah.
The measurements of entanglement show that you do have interaction at a distance.
And today, and this is what is crazy about physics, because we can talk about remote viewing or ESP or precog, life after death, ET, contact channeling, all of that stuff. But physics today wants to convince us of not only a parallel world, but that qubits and quantum computing operates from particles in a parallel world to our left, to our right, that are infinite. Now, that is the craziest. Now, in our world, that's okay. That's acceptable. But that is the craziest thing for science and physics to even suggest that this is going on. And then the world of remote viewing or anything else like that is not possible. You can't.
Yeah, parallel universes makes remote viewing simple.
Right.
Now, let me finish a story that I started in the very beginning of this program. Because as a physicist, I'm only telling you things that I've either done or seen that I've no doubt about it. And the thing that got me so interested in precognition lately is precognitive dreams. And the thing that's clear to me is that I will have a dream at 6 o'clock, and then I will get the feedback for that at 10 o'clock. And what's absolutely clear is that the image I see at 10 o'clock, as unlikely as it might be, is the cause of my dream at 4 hours earlier. So how do you, and you can say that it's that they're entangled, or you can say that it's retrocausal, which is what physics would normally say. But now that entanglement has come to the fore, I would say that my awakened brain at 10 o'clock is entangled with my sleeping brain at 6 o'clock. So you don't have to invoke any peculiar random causality. That is what my experience is. What shows up on the table is that I get to see some crazy thing, random thing at 10 o'clock, and I've already dreamt about it 4 hours earlier. And physicists, even though they deal with bizarre things, do insist on some kind of causality. So if I have a dream about some very unusual thing like electric trains in the living room, I want a cause for that. And the example I gave you was it shows up in the New York Times 2 hours earlier. So all of those, I think, are retrocausal, or the retrocausal because my awakened brain is entangled with my sleeping brain.
Okay, let me ask you something speculative, if I could. Is this once we understand it better, but is this the way we will communicate at great distances in the future? And if there is extraterrestrial life, well, there's lots of extraterrestrial life out there, but their method of communication, it would have to be faster than the speed of light, right? However, you're communicating. You can't wait 10,000 light years for a reply from your home planet. You would have to communicate in real time. Is this the way that communication will be done for us in the future? And is this how ET would be doing it?
He might be doing it, or it might be because we misapprehend the nature of the space-time we live in.
Mm-hmm.
See, Minkowski, the great German physicist who helped Einstein solve the relativity problem, because he was a great geometer, he invented what we could call a complex eighth space. Well, we live in a four space that we talk about. There are three common dimensions plus time as four dimensions. So we've become accustomed to four-dimensional space, three space and one time dimension. But each of those four dimensions might be a complex number. There's having a real part and an imaginary part. And I won't go into what the people who know an imaginary numbers will know what that means. But what it means is that there will always be a path through the complex four-dimensional space. There will always be a path whose total distance adds to zero. That you won't be able to tell by looking at the trajectory, but there will always be a path where you can go from here to there without exceeding the speed of light, because light doesn't have to exceed that velocity because there's no separation. That is anyway. So the idea, if you have a complex space-time, then you can get from one place to another place without violating relativity, and you do it instantaneously, and that solves most of the problems of extrasensory perception and does not generate any bad physics.
Well, I find that interesting because Brian Greene, who's great, I don't agree with all of his stuff, and I don't agree with everybody's everything all the time. But Brian Greene's current research is focusing on one of the craziest woo statements I've ever heard an established academic say. And he recently said that his current efforts are focusing on being able to ask a question and getting the answer before the question is written. Now that's a pretty bold statement. And what he is saying that it fits into physics. It's not going out of bounds. That you are able to send the question out and get the answer before the question is sent, right?
And you're sending it to yourself, and you get the answer from your future self.
Well, now he says, okay, so this is the other part, and this is where it comes right back into your research. He said it has nothing to do with time travel. It has nothing to do with that. It is staying in bounds of known physics. And that's what he's working on right now. And that is, the point that Einstein, that everybody keeps going back to, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Well, if you're getting the answer to the question before you send the question, then something is hauling balls, right? and it's not a question of speed or velocity. It's in the instant, right? It's in the now. It's not, back to your point, the distance traveled is zero.
Well, that's particularly true if they're entangled. That is, my dream about the trains was caused by something in the future, because the future brain and the present brain is entangled. So he may have a dream. He may have a dream about a problem, and then he wakes up. It's common among scientists, in fact, or researchers, to have a dream that contains the answer to your problem. There are many examples of that. That from this conversation, that doesn't even break new ground.
No, okay. So is that we've never had words for this in the past, right? And we struggle with the phenomena, but terms like deja vu immediately come to mind, which some would say that you having a dream, right, a precog type of dream, or that is deja vu. And don't all of us experience deja vu, whether we want to admit it or not? And is that the phenomena? It's a bad word. It's a bad term to use. I get that, but it is describing the same situation.
Well, deja vu is not one of my favorite phenomena, because really, deja vu is really a kind of error, in that you walk into an apartment, you feel, I've been here before, it all looks familiar to me, even though it's not familiar to you. That is, you're sort of misapprehending that the deja vu experience doesn't give you useful information. It doesn't tell you where the bathroom is going to be. It tells you instead it gives you the erroneous feeling that you've been here before. There's nobody says that deja vu gives you useful information. It gives you the feeling of having been there before, but you're mistaken.
But yes, okay, I get that. But what I am suggesting here is that all of this phenomena is connected, and quite possibly from the same source.
Well, they all involve perceptions or misperceptions by the brain. That is, the data. See, I'm doing far out physics, far out research, but I still want the data to stand still when I look at it. Mm-hmm. So the idea
right.
of having a dream about something you're going to experience later, even though the thing you experience later may be totally crazy, but your dream may often encompass that. I won't go into it. I had a dream about robbing a bank one time. It was a very, very clear dream, and I was obsessing about getting my fingerprints off of everything. And within an hour, I got a package containing a new glass cover for my cell phone, and said, before you do this, read the instructions, and here are 3 jars for getting your fingerprints off the face of the thing, so we'll wreck it. And I had no idea that fingerprints were in my future, but the dream was sort of a scary dream. If you don't do this right, you're going to break your phone. And I then had to follow the instructions to get my fingerprints off the glass. And that was a dream way far out of anything that I was even had on my mind. But I turned it into robbing. in the dream, I robbed the bank of a glass cover plate over the light switch that I fancied.
You didn't take any money?
No, I just took the
And
light.
you risk prison time for no monetary gain?
No, it was just for a light switch.
Just for a light switch. Oh man.
I wanted to tell you about something. See, I grew up in a very literary household. My father was a book publisher, as he published The Godfather with Mario Puzo, and he published the book about the prison Andersonville by McKinley Cantor. And I became friends with McKinley Cantor because he was interested in my work. And he said, you might like to read this book here that I wrote many years ago when I was in the Army. And the book is called Don't Touch Me. It's about a man in the Army who's him, who would psychically visit his wife in California while he was stationed in Japan. And it was about a sort of psychic love affair. And Ingo Swann writes about that. He has a book called Psychic Sexuality, where he talks about telesthesia. Telesthesia is like telepathy, which is mind to mind, but telesthesia is a sort of soul to soul or body to body. It's a way of sex on the astral plane, if you will. And Ingo Swann wrote this book called Psychic Sexuality, and he invented remote viewing, so you have to trust him that he knew what he was doing here. But McKinley Cantor had these experiences with his wife where he would visit her, and he said the only problem was there's a 12-hour time difference between Japan and San Francisco, and we would often make contact and she would be on the freeway, and that was not convenient for her. But the idea of heart-to-heart experiences between consenting adults on the astral plane is a new opportunity for intimacy.
Well, that's Haight-Ashbury in 1968, isn't it? So I had to say that, Russell. I had to do it. I couldn't help myself, man.
But no drugs are required.
No drugs required. No, you just have to be with somebody that's thinking like you, and experimenting with that. I wanted to ask you this, especially, to a physicist. This is a hotly debated question, and I hit everybody with it. Doesn't matter about your background. Is consciousness physical or non-physical?
Well, do you think that light is physical or non-physical? The consciousness is like a electromagnetic wave, travels through space and time. So I don't know enough about consciousness to say that it's not physical, because you can do, there's so much available with things you can do with your conscious mind that it's the idea that if it's not physical, what is it? And you just say, I don't know, it's just not physical. You got to have some counter example that says, no, you can't do that with your ordinary consciousness.
Well, and so, biologists and chemists.
An example would be the survival of bodily death. That would be a counterexample. That I'm quite convinced that some people who have died still manifest their personality on this sphere. So they are not. They don't have any physical component that we're aware of. In fact, we don't know where they would be in space time. But people occasionally, well, I'll say, there's my daughter was a psychiatrist and was also very psychic, and she died unfortunately in her 40th year. And many people who loved her get messages from her frequently to send to me from wherever she is now. But I'm persuaded because of highly detailed things that people say. Elizabeth said, "You've got to tell my father such and such." These are people I don't know who have to look me up and give me some message from my deceased loving daughter. So I'm quite convinced that some aspect of her survives, and that aspect is probably not physical.
It's not physical. And so the argument is laid out from those that don't believe in anything. Okay? All right. They don't believe it. But the argument is consciousness is chemistry. It's every particle has a little piece of consciousness in it. You put enough of it together, and then your brain, and then it makes, and then consciousness comes from that because enough of it is lumped together. Well, then that would suggest, if you are of that closed-minded thought pattern, that this little green flashlight is made from the same particles that I am and that you are. Atoms are atoms, right? It's that simple. So then that means that there's consciousness in here. The bigger the flashlight, the more consciousness. I don't buy into that. So that would suggest that consciousness is in every single particle. That Earth has a consciousness then, right? That's a lot of particles on the planet Earth. Or it exists outside of the physical and then turns around and enters. Now that would make a lot of sense to me. I don't think rocks or sand on a beach is conscious, but maybe it is.
I mean, you're sort of drifting off into pan consciousness and says that everything is conscious. And I would not be happy with that. I think that the evidence for survival is quite strong. Many people have studied survival and have. I'll briefly give you an example. I'm sort of stuttering because I'm not sure I want to go into. So somebody got a message from my daughter, a person I didn't know, and gave me a message about something that had happened in my wife and my early childhood misadventures. We didn't abuse my daughter. We just stuffed her into something she didn't want to wear to please my mother. And Elizabeth gave that message to a person I didn't know, and no living person knew anything about stuffing poor Elizabeth into a red dress. So I've now written up the red dress experiment because it seemed to me prima facie very strong evidence that that my daughter could and it's the kind of thing, she was a very, very smart scientist. It was the kind of experiment that she would dream up that couldn't be easily falsified because you didn't have knowledgeable people on the chain. That is, nobody knew the answer to that experiment except me. Everybody else had died. And the person that she was told gave the experiment to also didn't know anything about it. No living person knew about this message about the terrible red dress. the only person who knew about it was me, and she arranged the experiments so that the data would get to me. So she made a believer out of me because the data was overwhelming.
When something like that for you to understand, when that occurs, you get it. But when you have somebody that doesn't want to get it, right? It's all BS. Are they shutting their mind off?
In general, even if I have a hard case, as in the case of the skeptic who was able to describe my nesting silver spheres, you have to decide: is a person a fair witness? Does he have a scientific bone in his body, or is he a religious fanatic who hates ESP because it violates his religion? Now, if a person has a religious belief that the psychic ability is from the devil, then he's not going to be able to do it. But in my long experience, my 50-year sabbatical between SRI and where I am now, I have found very, very few people who can't do remote viewing as you just did on the screen. I have to talk to them until they say, sort of, I surrender. What do I do? I'll try it. What do I do? And once they get to the what do I do place, then they do it.
You know, going back to our little experiment, you could have held up a paper cup. You could have held up a coffee cup. You could have held up a book. You could have held up anything, and I could have described anything. That was pretty strange, and I was struggling with. It was awesome. It was strange. It was awesome in a strange way. It was strange in an awesome way.
It shows that because it's what my friend Jeffrey Michelin would call that a highly numinous object. The idea of a 8-inch switchblade, just to say I've got an 8-inch switchblade in my hand, you provide the dripping blood out of your imagination. I mean, once you see this giant shiny blade, it's full of energy. I've never used it for a remote viewing target before, but when you said I really want to do it, I sort of scanned my desk. What's here? What is it? Carl Jung talked about numinosity as a property that sort of fills the world. And I'll give you an example of another thing. It's sort of important. The most numinous object that I have for remote viewing is a large brass casting of the god Shiva with eight arms sticking out. And Shiva is the only target that I've ever had in a group where I said, does anyone have an idea what's in the box? And people will stand up and say, it looks like Shiva. And it's because Shiva is such an archetype. The people who are invested in Shiva or are meditated with Shiva are all queued up to have that archetype tickled back. And that's the only thing. Nobody's ever said I see a switchblade or I see a coffee cup. Shiva is the only one, and that's happened numerous times where I will say, does anyone have a strong feeling for what this is? And people just stand up and say, I've never done before, but Shiva came to view. So that's what we mean by a numinous target. There's hundreds of millions of people pray to Shiva every day. So it's the collective unconscious.
There was, I think it was the movie The Right Stuff, Russell. I could have it wrong, but there's, I think it's The Right Stuff, where I don't know if it's Edgar Mitchell or Gordon Cooper, somebody's orbiting the Earth in like Gemini or Mercury or something. And they describe these glowing things buzzing around the spacecraft as they're going around. And at the same time, in Australia, there was an Aboriginal shaman doing this ritualistic thing around a fire, creating these sparks. And that's what was seen around the spacecraft. And the description was happening at the same time. And as it passed over Australia, they made the radio connection because of the radio telescope there. When something like that happens, is it the shaman on the ground sending the image, or is it the other way around? Is the image coming from the spacecraft, right?
It's all the people with the shaman. If the shaman has 100 people chanting in a circle,
right,
stirs up the fire, I would say that it's the community that creates the image.
You know the scene that I'm talking about, right?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, because you're very accurate in what you're describing. That's pretty close, actually. That's pretty close. That's interesting. And now,
I just visualized what it would take to create this. From my life experience now, if you say a person sees XYZ, I say, well, what could happen to cause him to have that experience?
Hey, Russell, can I ask you a question? This is personal. This is just for me because I love hair. Who does your hair?
God does my hair.
God does your hair. Oh man, that's some anti-gravitic action going on. You know that, right?
Well, my wife gets to pull a strainer through it before I go on television.
And she's awesome. She's awesome.
She is awesome. She also was able to figure out the pathway to get on your program. I would not have been able to figure out. Well, we don't have to dwell on it. It's for an outsider, it's very hard to get onto your stage.
No, you did it well though. You were waiting. And we got it. It was me that had the problems today. You were all hands on deck. It was me that had the issues. But what I wanted to ask you was the thought experiments that were, and literally thought experiments, that a couple of astronauts wanted to do while out orbiting Earth and connecting back to the planet. I think that's a pretty effective use of science, isn't it?
Oh, I know. I wanted to tell you what was wrong with Edgar Mitchell's experiments. Sending messages psychically has a signal to noise problem. And that is that if I tell you I've got a deck of cards in my hand, I've just pulled out a card and I'm not looking at it, but I'm going to show it to you. Can you tell me what the card is? That's a very tough experiment because you already know what all the cards are. So if I say I've got a card from the deck, the first thing that shows up is the ace of spades, probably. And the fact that you know all the hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades, those are archetypal signals in your brain already. That makes it much harder. That is a signal to noise problem. That is the fact that there's any card guessing experiment where you know what the cards are is much harder than describing an object that I've snatched off my desk. Because if I tell you I've just grabbed an interesting object off my desk, you do your remote viewing against a dark field. You don't have an idea.
Right.
If I tell you that I've pulled a card out of a deck of cards, I've given you a tremendous amount of information, all of which is noise, about the whole deck of cards. And that's a very important idea. Padmasambhava understood that. He said that naming things interferes with your experiencing space and time. Otherwise, you can travel through time because your consciousness travels independent of time and space.
Right.
And he writes that as though he knew all about relativity 1,200 years ago. But he was aware of the idea of mental noise. And Ingo Swann steered us away from card guessing. The fact that it's a tragedy in a way that J.B. Rhine spent decades teaching people how to guess cards, because guessing cards is infinitely harder than describing where somebody is hiding in the Bay Area. There are infinitely many places to hide.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's easier than card guessing.
And one would think the opposite would be true, right? You've got 4, right? You've got diamonds, spades, hearts, and clubs, right? So you've got 4. Then you've got 52 cards, and you've got 2 colors. So one would think that would be easier.
All of what you just told me is creates noise.
Right.
It just all that information is noise. Rather, if I told you instead, I've got a picture here from the Louvre, really nice looking, interesting picture, could be anything, and I love the picture I'm looking at. That would be much easier than guessing a playing card.
Really?
That's absolutely true. There's no doubt about that. That is anybody who starts the experiment with saying, "Here's a deck of cards," tell them to stuff the deck of cards. That's too difficult.
So, ESPresearch.com is your website. Where can everybody reach out and stay up with what you're doing?
That's a pretty active website, and I've just built that because my previous webmaster died and took all my data with her. So the ESPresearch.com is brand new. It's got a bunch of ESP movies on it, in addition to some of the data that used to be classified. The most recent thing I've done is Third Eye Spies, which is a movie based on the movie, which is a book based on the movie. I have a movie called Third Eye Spies, which was very successful.
Yeah, Lance Mungia. Yeah, great movie.
Thank you. And it's still running all over the place. And Third Eye Spies is a book drawn significantly from the teachings of Ingo Swann in an effort to give people a manual for learning how to do remote viewing and how to work with another person so you can help one another. The best way to learn remote viewing is to find a partner and work with that person who will periodically bring you an object in a bag. And again, you don't want the person to know what's in the bag because you don't want to teach yourself to read that person's mind. You want them to arrange it so they don't know what's in the particular bag she brought to you, because you want to be able to experience what you'll see in the future.
Wow, that's interesting.
But see, otherwise, if I say I've got an interesting object in my box here, you can. The easiest place to get that is from my brain, since they already know the answer.
Yeah. Wow, that's mind blowing. Do you know Robert Knight?
No, I don't.
You don't know Robert Knight? Okay. I'm going to get email from him tomorrow. He's a really good friend of Ingo Swann's, and he's a rock and roll photographer. So I didn't know if you knew Robert, but I'm sure he's listening to this show. Russell, man, another great conversation, my friend. Great seeing you. And I want to invest in your hair products that you are using.
Thank you.
Russell, you're the very best. Thank you so much.
Very happy to work with you, and thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always fun to talk with you.
You're the best, Russell. Give my best to your wife and keep doing what you're doing, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Russell Targ, everybody. That was, man, I love my job. Wow, somebody pinch me. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you, Russell Targ. Let's see, what have I got going on tomorrow on the show? Oh, UFO photographs and ancient artifacts. Michael Orrell is with us tomorrow night. So I'll see everybody tomorrow. Until then, go Beckley Tepe. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Beckley Tepe.